I initially wanted to start by thanking the panelists for really nice discussions. I'm gonna change my start and start by thanking Tom for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. But I think what we had here in this panel was kind of a really diverse set of case studies and inputs. And what we can take away from this as a first thing is that this whole thing of citizen science, do-it-yourself or makers movement should not be thought of as one coherent thing or one coherent animal, but needs rather to be understood in terms of locally situated practices by a diverse set of actors. But before I start with my comments, I wanted to give you a bit of a background on myself so that you know where my comments actually come from. I've been with Angelo's group here since the beginning of February, so I've been here roughly a month. And before that, I worked at the University of Vienna on transdisciplinary sustainability research. So my interest really is in these concrete research practices and how collaboration is performed and emerges in these practices. And that's kind of the background for my comments. And these comments I grouped my comments around two basic lines of thought. The first is what could refer to as the temporal politics of participation and collaboration, and the second one, the spatialities of collaboration and participation. And when we think about the temporal politics, it's a lot about how does participation and collaboration take place? Is it like punctual meetings, or is it more in terms of a long-term engagement? Or this has recently been discussed in like the distinction between logics of choice and logics of care. And I think that has been very nice in Daniela's talk, so I would be really interested to learn more about what partnership in this case means and how knowledge production goes on after these different engagements you do. And also, I think this was very nicely visible in Jacqueline's focus on the products of collaboration, because here we have really material outputs of these collaborations. So if we think, for example, of the work of French cultural sociologist / STS person, Antoine Aignan, I think it would be interesting to think about these products as material objects that kind of enable attachment and therefore enable more long-term engagement. And just my second line of thoughts was about the spatialities. So since this panel is called the emerging loci, so I think we should think about what are the actual spaces. And in that sense, I liked Ilias' picture at the beginning of his presentation very much, where he really showed what is the actual space, what are the things that are in those spaces, and kind of directed our attention to like what are the people that are dwelling in those spaces, and how are these spaces of engagement really created as material settings. And I guess my time will now be up soon. So just one little last comment. I really liked how Ron talked about the importance to keep in mind power relations in participation, because I think unless or despite that people always talk about inclusion in very enthusiastic terms, we need to stay alert to the power relations that creep in, and even through notions such as empowerment, there's always still somebody empowering somebody else. So I had to think a bit of Brian Wynn's distinction in invited and uninvited publics there. But yeah, thanks again for these interesting talks.